Hi, Wendy. Just wanted to give you a little bit of feedback on your post here in discussion 2 of week 1 on common pool resources. I noticed that in your post you do mention the text. Just want to say be sure to put the citation, down at the bottom of your post somewhere. Just copy it from the course materials page and stick it in there so that we know that the information is coming from one of your sources. It's just a really easy thing to do, and it's a good habit to get into. So getting back to your post, I just wanted to tell you that you're absolutely right. Aquifers are porous, you know, giant bits of gravel and rock and everything else where water is basically absorbed. So a lot of times from aquifers we get what we call groundwater, um, and depending on where you live, there could be lots of groundwater or really not all that much groundwater. Here in San Diego, we have actually very few aquifers. But if you go further north to the Los Angeles Basin, the Los Angeles Basin is basically like one big giant aquifer. So it really is hard to privatize the aquifer. That's not really what we think about. You can privatize a piece of land, or you can privatize a well on a piece of land that somebody owns where you draw the water from, but you can't own all of the rock formation underneath the city of Los Angeles that holds all that water. So, definitely can't be privately owned unless the aquifer just happens to be a smaller one that is on a big giant piece of land that somebody owns. But in that case, you really don't need collective action because any of the water that's coming from it is only going to go to one person. In general, we need collective action to manage the aquifer because when there's 100 people on the aquifer, each with their own well, drawing water up out of the wells, um, you know, you have to make sure that nobody's polluting, make sure that one person isn't sucking all the water out, which is really a big issue in some of the farming communities in California nowadays. Um, it gets really, really contentious actually to the point where some places have laws that prohibit you from collecting rainwater because the rainwater is supposed to recharge the aquifer. Um, but anyway, like you said, it's really kind of a collective action kind of thing, and the agencies that manage aquifers are tied to the EPA. Here in California, we have the Water Quality Control Board, and they have a groundwater division that monitors the levels of pollution in an aquifer, levy fines on polluters, and in general try to make sure that the aquifers are cleaned up and not threatened by economic development. In particular, there's one aquifer here in the San Diego River watershed that has a huge plume of pollution from a petroleum filling station, and that's been a really major problem that the groundwater basins branch at the Water Quality Control Board has been trying to clean up for years. Unfortunately, it runs underneath Qualcomm Stadium, which is a whole another set of problems. So, you're correct in identifying the polluter pays dilemma. I think you understand that pretty well. It basically means that when BP spills oil, they should be responsible for cleaning it up. In addition, anybody else that pollutes the environment should be responsible for cleaning it up. The problem is that a lot of companies, like you mentioned, have gotten away with it for so long that it's really hard to get an entity to clean something up when they no longer exist. And when we have negative externalities like a company that creates lots of dust that just flies everywhere, how are you going to get that company to clean up the entire city and all the dust that's been flying out of a construction site or a cement factory or something like that? What they really need to do is pay to contain that. The one thing that you didn't mention in your post was about rival or non-rival, which is a really important concept when we talk about this collective action. Rival means that if I consume it, then it's going to take away from another person being able to consume it. So most goods that we use are rival in consumption. It's an economic term. If I have a gallon of milk and I drink some of it, and then my roommate comes along and drinks some more of it, well, we're actually rivals in consumption because there's a limited supply of milk, and if I drink most of the milk, he's not going to have milk for his cereal, right? That's sort of one way to look at it. And non-rival are goods that when you use them, it doesn't take away from another person's ability to use them. And the most common example is a fireworks display. You can have the city put on a fireworks display. 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 100,000 people could watch it, and it's not going to diminish the value of the display for anybody that watches it. So in general, we want to think about how collective action can happen when something is rival in consumption and excludable, meaning I can keep my roommate from drinking the milk by putting a lock on the refrigerator. Then I can have private milk. Otherwise, it needs to be managed by collective action, because if I can't keep people out, like fish in the ocean are rival in consumption. If I eat fish, there's less fish for you. But it's really hard to keep people out of the ocean and keep them away from the fish. So collective action and international treaties, law of the sea, fishing permits and fishing regulations, that sort of thing, is collective action that manages that type of resource. So I hope that helps out a little bit. In your future posts, just be sure to add your references and your citations in there. Otherwise, this is a good post, and I think you understand the concepts really well.